I want to go back to the first album that James recorded, which was under Apple Records. There's a familiar song title on that album, but the song itself is different from the one that most know, and that's Carolina in My Mind. The version that's included on James Taylor's Best Of from 1976, very different. The story behind that new recording is in your book. Warner Brothers asked Peter if James would re-record that song and Something in the Way She Moves from the Apple Records album. Can you talk about why Warner Brothers wanted those two new recordings? Why did they end up being recorded differently?
Yes. Well, if you recall, in the late 70s, early 80s, for a while, Apple was there were a lot of lawsuits going on between the Beatles, between Apple and Capitol. I mean, it was like, just lawyer heaven for a while. And so those tapes, those sessions were kind of in this limbo where you couldn't just license them, which would have been the easy thing to do. And so because they weren't available, and Warner Brothers wanted those two songs on that greatest hits album, they needed to re-record them. And Peter was always, and even James Taylor told me that though that first album was a little overproduced, Peter was so enamored of James and the talent and the songs that he wanted to make them stand out from the folk world. So there's some string quartet on it. They're fuller production. I mean, even Carolina in My Mind, the first time I heard it on the radio, it's a great production. But by the time James Taylor became a hit with Fire and Rain and those Warner Brothers records, he was doing things much more low key and acoustic. And so, since they had been doing Carolina in My Mind in that way for a few years now, live, it was like, well, let's just do it in that way, not try to recreate that original version. So it's much more, like I said, acoustic-y and a little slower. So that's the way those two songs were done for the greatest hits.